This is a story about a toxic fangirl kicking OP out of the group with the help of her trusty Simp.
It's about time I get on the CritCrab channel. What's up, everybody?
Why are you not in uniform?
I'm Blaine Simple, and we're reading horror stories today.
Yeah! Role post. Technically not a D&D campaign story, although we use the D&D 5e system to roleplay. Hope it counts. This is something that happened 5 or 4 years ago, so I'm mostly telling this because I can finally look and not feel so awful about it. But also, I just wanted to share it in case anyone has had the bad luck of finding themselves in a similar situation. Maybe they can recognize the signs earlier and avoid all the trouble I had. Okay, context. I used to roleplay on an MMORPG guild that had around 20 or so active members, but I'll try to reduce this to the bare minimum of important players, with fake names just in case. My character was Raya, a female warrior. Then there were 2 of the closest friends I made during that time, C, a male hunter, and Lona, a female shaman. Shoes was one of the moderators of the guild, and although more people had fault in this, the 2 true masterminds were Maz, male warrior, and Fan, the female priestess. Maz was what we would call a fucking idiot, and Fan was a crazy bitch, but I'm getting ahead of myself. For additional info, I didn't know any of this had happened until after a year of the original events, so I'll try to tell the story as I remember it happening while filling in the blanks. I was invited to the guild by C. We knew each other from Tumblr, and although I had played in the game long before coming in contact with the guild, I had actually never tried RP before, so I agreed to give it a try. I truly enjoyed it, and I had lots of fun. I had always been very interested in the lore of the game, which made me enjoy the whole thing even more. And other players sometimes asked me for info if there wasn't a moderator present. Because of this, I was eventually made a mod too, and here is where the problems slowly started. My promotion didn't sit well with Maz because I had only been on the guild for about 4 months, and he had been for over 2 years, I think. And I was a mod while he wasn't. This guy had a pretty bad case of the main character syndrome, and he would be immensely pissed off if he lost any of the friendly combats the characters would RP in spare time. He would whine if people didn't listen to his ideas or instantly follow him as if he were the leader. He always had to make his character be the best at everything. Oh, also, his, quote, character's opinion was that women only existed to be cute, serve their men, and bear children. My PC did none of those things, so he was openly hostile to her, and to me, with the excuse of, it's what my character would do.
Whoa, already starting on a good foot, aren't we, Maz? And the most annoying part to me, I kid you not, was that every single month, he would send a message to the moderator group asking to be made one, saying that he had earned it, that he should be one, and that he did and contributed to the RP more than any other player. You can guess, he did in fact not. He never took the role of Game Master or suggested campaign stories to RP, never took responsibility for anything, and probably just wanted the position so that he could make the other players do what he said. For context, a moderator was a position with authority, both on-roll and off-roll. As in, you were a sergeant or a captain inside the Adventurers Guild. You can imagine we never made him mod or gave him any authority or power over the other players because we knew he would try to abuse it. Why not just kick him? He was IRL friends with one of the other mods, so we couldn't.
Oh yeah, this is one of those no-win scenarios where you either maintain your friendship with that guy at the expense of your fun, or keep the game fun at the cost of your friendship. It's true, some people are amazing friends out of game, but as soon as they get behind a screen, they're just the worst and you have to tolerate them. So it's more complicated than just dumping them 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, I understand relationships like that all too well. People who, on one side, want you to act a very certain way, and if you stop acting that way, they're not going to be friends with you. It's a really scary tightrope you gotta walk. If their friendship really matters to you, then you keep walking it. But if not, you just gotta fall, and ultimately that's your choice to decide. But interested to see what OP does here in this situation.
Yeah, that is very true, and it's something that, I I've had experience with, you may have, a lot of people watching probably totally have, given the sheer amount of people who watch my videos who have also had horror stories happen to them. When somebody is your friend and you think they're your friend, but they're behaving in ways that a friend wouldn't treat you as soon as you're playing a game together. At that point, you kind of have to decide, like, is this person really worth keeping around if they completely disrespect my world, my characters, NPCs, campaign, or in this scenario, like, the respect and, like, cohesiveness of the MMO guild, which is World of Warcraft. That was a very poor job if they did try obscuring what MMO they were playing.
I think they skipped it just because they didn't want it to be like the main focal point or something.
Yeah, that's true. I just immediately picked up World of Warcraft from it. Anyways, it's just a very fine line you have to cross, and sometimes people understand that they are with a toxic friend through playing with this person. They're like, this person kind of makes fun of me and mocks me, in real life, but it's nothing. But they only really come out as like, I'm a jerk to you, and I don't respect you, when you're trying to run a D&D game or play another type of game with them.
Their true colors finally reveal themselves when you become vulnerable in a tabletop role-playing game.
That's exactly it. There's a lot of, like, vulnerability that goes into tabletop role-playing games, a lot of putting yourself out there, and, like, roleplay especially is incredibly vulnerable. So when somebody, especially somebody who you think is your friend, just kind of comes out and is like, fucking cringe, bro, it hurts. It actually does, even though it's supposed to be a game. You kind of have to decide when somebody's being your friend and when they're not. A lot of the times it's incredibly complicated. Anyways, back to the story.
So he hated me because I stole his position and because my character was not a real woman, which made it double funny when Fan appeared. Maz's tactic was to drool after any female player that roleplayed a female character, only to then act like an a-hole when he was told to F off. Fan apparently enjoyed his attention, and pulled him by the strings into the most perfect puppet. She was another player that couldn't be happy if she wasn't the center of the universe, but in a different way. Now I should explain the relationship between C's character and mine. C roleplayed her hunter as kind of a womanizer, and had actually been with many other characters of the guild, while Ryo was less into flirting, but also a free spirit. They had started as friends, evolving later into romance, and since both of us drew our RP stuff, we would post it on Tumblr, talk about how we could make their relationship further, and just have fun with the shipping. It seems Fan hated that. She had been a follower of C before getting into the guild, and insisted on getting her character pregnant from C's, expecting that it would make him stay with her forever. Spoilers, it didn't, and later I learned that she pestered my friend constantly so she would accept to make their characters an official couple, despite C being very clear she didn't want that for her character. Certain people of the community even observed and commented, amongst themselves, that Fan would like and reblog every single piece of art C posted, except the ones in which my character appeared.
Ooh, we're getting a bit of jealousy, I think.
It's starting. They're tearing each other to shreds.
So it begins. There's always a point in a horror story where it's gone from a lot of red flags. Like, you can have a ton of red flags, but never a horror story, right? It's like when you're, like, out doing whatever and it's like, there's high risk for a forest fire. If there's no actual spark to set the forest fire in motion, it's just a really high risk scenario. But I would say we are on the cusp of the actual horror story. All the conditions have been set, and now the Jenga tower's about to collapse.
The tensions have built. Mm-hmm. Give me the drama.
Yes, give us the drama. All right, let's go. Around this time, one of the other mods, Shoes, told all of the mods to start screenshotting all of the RP sessions we assisted. So they already really don't trust each other. We wrote on the chat of the game to roleplay and saved them in a drive folder for the mod group to check. She originally used the excuse that, because we were so many, we could keep track of who had said what and what had been the dice throws of the last session better that way. Later, I learned she had been looking out for me in her own way, because Maz and Fan had first tried to have me kicked out of the guild by complaining to some of the mods, with vague accusations ranged from being rude to her character is a slut. When Shoes reprimanded them, they changed tactics. Here is where the really wild shit starts to happen. According to what different players remember, Fan and Maz started to throw dirt on me at every possible opportunity. manufacturing interactions they had with me or reinterpreting my own words to make them seem more aggressive or disrespectful to the players. Things got so bad when I had to admonish actually problematic users, such as new ones that didn't want to follow our guidelines or disrespected other players. It was me kicking out people I didn't like. If we didn't allow something to the players because it went against the already established canon of the guild, it was me, and only me, that didn't want people to have fun, not a decision taken by the mods as a group. The most notorious one was when Fan had wanted to go on a mission pregnant of 7 months. And when I told her that she might have to throw the dice to see if she lost the child, both she and Maz flipped on me, arguing back and going to talk to every mod to protest. And they told them the same thing as me, because again, we took decisions as a group.
I can't go on a daring adventure 7 months pregnant? Rage! Rage!
Yeah, it's like, on one hand, I feel like rolling to lose your baby because you went on an adventure 7 months pregnant. It sounds kinda weird a little bit, especially given that this is a video game and not Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah, this amount of realism seems very strange for this.
It seems very strange and dark. Like, you know? Like, it's an RP guild in an MMO, and it's like, you have to roll to lose your baby. Okay, this is, like, really weird to me personally. I know that OP is the victim, and so are the people who are victimized in this story, like the entire guild. And given that all of the mods agreed on this ruling, I'm going to assume that's the actual tone of the guild.
Yeah.
So this makes sense to them and their playstyle, which I'm not ripping on at all. However, I can understand being a bit put off by that. Like, I can understand feeling like, I don't really want to have to do that. I don't want to have to roll to lose my kid because I wanted to have a bit of fun.
Yeah, it's ultimately this clash that'll lead us further down the rabbit hole of this horror story.
Yeah, as much as Fan and Mods seem like really toxic people that I don't like or want to be around, on this specific one, it doesn't feel like anybody's the bad guy.
Yeah, not yet.
It's different play styles, different things they want. However, Fan and Moz are not excused for everything they have done and the even worse things that they're about to do.
I'm not sure how they twisted the story to the other players, but even though I didn't know they were doing so, I could feel something was wrong. For the longest time, I thought it was my imagination, or that I was overthinking. The truth was, little by little, fewer players would say hi back to me when I greeted them on the chat, while answering back no problem to others. If I tried to deliver some news for events or announcements, it was as if I had said nothing. At the end of each session or each campaign, the players would thank the mods that had organized it, except me, even when they knew I had taken care of the NPCs or something else. They had a group call on TeamSpeak with some players while the RP was going on, and talked things while keeping me completely in the dark about our group decisions or what to do as a team, and judging my every comment or action. This was gradual, but it went on for months, to the point where the only ones still friendly to greet me were C, Lona, and the other mods. Okay, so this is a classic example of talking behind people's backs and slowly corrupting their mindsets to the point where they just hate someone, and you never know why.
It's always so shady. Like, even if you're the good guy, you know, in big quotations, just talking shit behind somebody's back, it's something that genuinely aggravates me and I don't like. It seems so underhanded and dirty to see, like, these guys doing it just because they don't agree with all of the mods unanimously agreeing on a ruling, as well as disliking OP because of other things in the background, going behind their backs and probably saying things that are completely untrue, some exaggerated truths, misquotes, feels so underhanded and just proves they don't actually have a leg to stand on when it comes to disliking OP. And poor C. Maz had been tailgating after Fan's character from the beginning, but had never actually gotten any, quote, action out of it until Fan had suggested a threesome between Maz, C, and Fan. C had accepted because her character was that kind of party guy, and now it was 2 people instead of 1 trying to chain C to her side. Both Fan and Maz would ask C constantly to roleplay alone. Both would try to drag him away from RP scenes that he had with other characters, and she confessed to me, much later, that she tried to say no, but Fan would get passive-aggressive. Maz would play the victim game, and she felt bad for it. Once Fan even yelled at her when, on a call, she mentioned she was drawing an RP scene between Raya and C. She felt anxious each time she wanted to RP with me or somebody else, because she knew the other two would blow up at her. She should have told us so the moderators could intervene, but they had emotionally manipulated her into believing that the problem was her, not them, and she stopped roleplaying.
Classic manipulation. Getting people to think that they are the issue the whole time and that you did absolutely nothing wrong. Many times it's players or dungeon masters like taking the fault, you know? Admitting that maybe they're self-conscious and they honestly thought that they were the issue and respectfully leave. When in reality, it was other players of the party that were causing the issues the whole time, and you just didn't want anyone to feel bad.
And that's like one of the scariest things about toxic relationships, mental and emotional manipulation. Like scarier than yelling or any other series of toxic traits. It's when they twist your brain around to where you think that you're actually the bad guy.
When she left, and later when Lona did so too, I had no one left on the guild that actually wanted to RP with me. Most of the mods had left, only one other guy and I remained. And I couldn't find joy in that roleplay style anymore, so I left too. The thing is, I kept in contact with both C and Lona. Often played games with them, and even got into Lona's D&D campaign. And 1 year later, Lona happened to coincide with a player from the guild on an RP server. When casually catching up, he brought up that he was in a D&D Discord game with me, and the other player asked, "What? You're still talking to that a-hole?" Lona instantly went WTF and asked him what the hell he was talking about. When the other player started to retell all of my supposed offenses, Lona instantly called bullshit on that, because he had been a mod and knew how things had actually happened. Long story short, the moment a friend stood up for me, word spread around, and suddenly, when people started comparing notes, they realized what had actually happened, and even more shit got uncovered up. Apparently, there were receipts of fans sending harassment using the Anon feature on Tumblr to members of her old guilds, trying to do exactly the same thing. Get with someone else's character by eliminating the competence. Maz had kept screenshots of other female players' pics on social media in a folder with porn, etc, etc. Want to know how people learned of this last one? Fan made that detail public in an attempt to throw Maz under the bus and paint herself as the innocent one, being abused and manipulated by him, but people had too many receipts against her for it to work. Funny thing, none of the other players ever came to talk to me. Not a single apology for basically ostracizing me from my own community, or believing lies told about me. None of them thought even once to ask me for the truth, or at least my point of view in all of those instances. All of this info was retold to me by Lona or by C.
I feel like at a certain point, you can just say, hey, sorry I treated you this way, but I got really faulty information.
The way that I see it, though, I want to hear conflicting viewpoints, and then I want to be able to pick for myself which one's the truth. But that's not what they did.
It's definitely better to cross-examine, compare notes, which it looks like these people eventually did, but still, they just kind of assumed that it was true and ran with it, which in my opinion makes them all a little bit complicit in the negative experience.
Avoid these problems when you can. Always tell the truth.
Blaine and Crab, simple rule. Always tell the truth, don't be a stinking liar.
It's just that easy.
Lucky for me, I'm away from that toxic environment now, and at least I kept the good friends I made. But for example, C has lost any joy in RP because of that experience. Sometimes I'm still paranoid when I get to a new community or server. I wouldn't want this to happen to someone else, so all I hope you can take away from this is that 1. If you feel uncomfortable with RP, even if your character would have no problem, speak up and have boundaries. Don't believe at face value the things you're told about others, especially if they're focused on trash talking one single person and trying to rewrite your interactions with them. Talk directly to the offender. Maybe you'll discover it was true all along, maybe the opposite, but at least you won't be manipulated into condemning an innocent person. And 3, if you think someone has a problem with you, ask them directly. Hopefully it was your insecurities or a misunderstanding, and maybe it'll clear up mistakes you both have made, but it's better to know instead of avoiding conflict. At least you'll know if there's something you can do about it or not.
TLDR, obsessive players try to kick me out of my RP guild by lying, manipulating, and abusing other members because they saw me as an obstacle for their romantic RP.
End post. That is such a weird story.
I'm glad we were able to read through it together. That was a trip.
I couldn't have done that one on my own. But this is one of the weirdest motives I've heard for behaving as badly as they did, right? I think you're getting in the way of my romance RP with this other person. I don't think you would have stopped us, but we're still just gonna swing for the knees here.
I need my sexy time, CritCrab, and I won't let you get in the way of it.
That's gonna be every single comment. I'm calling it right now. Anyways, as crazy as that story was, you have your own horror story, I believe.
Indeed, I've been saving this one. It's been cooking for this very occasion.
Oh?
Let's go ahead and pop into it, shall we?
Yeah, let's get right into it.
While growing up, I had experienced a lot of video games and concepts taking homage to D&D, but never knew about the tabletop game itself until my late teens. After reading up on the rules and hosting a few private test games with family and some close friends, I had a solid grasp on the 5e system and was now interested in finding some online groups to host for. Now, due to having money issues as well, I immediately tried jumping into the pay-to-play D&D space, both to recuperate the membership fee and book prices on the platform I was using, and incentivize players who joined to give the game the respect it deserved. I launched the public post asking if anyone on the website was interested in joining, and created an application they could fill out with their information. Now before this, I barely had any practical experience dealing with other human beings outside my close relationship circles. I've always been business savvy, so I knew how to set up all the pages and the recruitment process, but none of that would prepare me for dealing with the people who would end up joining these campaigns. One person in particular, let's call him Tick, who'd wind up latching himself to me for the next month. After getting a group of 4 players together, the first session of the campaign commenced. I began by explaining the world to everyone and the quest they'd be completing. However, during all of this, I noticed that someone was drawing on the digital tabletop with one of the marker tools. Glancing over, I could see that a crude depiction of the male genitalia had just been sketched on the face of my map, traced over a particular land formation that protruded out a bit more than the rest. Haha, yeah I know, funny wiener joke, nothing too serious. But considering that this was session 0 of our pay-to-play game, you'd hope everyone would be a bit more classy and spend more time knowing each other before acting this way. This would be the first red flag of many that I wouldn't catch on to until it was too late.
Yeah, that's the case, but here's the thing. I see in a lot of these horror stories, putting a little bit of blame on yourself with I didn't notice this sooner. If OP, in a lot of these scenarios, had, cracked down on the first red flag, they would be the one coming off as that guy. A red flag is just that. Definitely a warning, but, it's nothing awful on its own.
Yeah, hey bro, it's just a wiener. Why are you taking it so seriously? You just murdered that man.
Yeah, exactly. It's juvenile, it's immature, but it's if you just kicked him out for that, that would come off as a bit
D&D horror story, DM kicks player out for drawing a willy.
Yeah, it's I just drew a dick on the thing. It's not awful. I'm not a terrible person, It's but still, at the same time, you can smell it in the wind. Something could be going on here. So, just a message to all the OPs who've been on the receiving end of a Category 5 horror story. It's not your fault for not kicking them out at the first possible instance where they did something that peeved you.
Yeah. Keeping a diligent watch as things occur is the most crucial aspect of catching a horror story early.
Exactly. A session 0 is incredibly important. If they decide to break the rules, you will have all of the group's support by default because you already cleared these pre-established rules. But again, not much you can do about a dude drawing a dick on a map.
In the sessions that came after, Tick would continue to make unnecessarily disruptive attempts at humor by getting way too horny whenever something slightly suggestive occurred, continued to draw inappropriate body parts all over the map, kept asking me if he could have his character go to brothels any chance he got, and always wanted to know how hot all the women in town were, followed up with another question discerning the size of their chests. And don't think the other players at the party were nearly as oblivious to these issues as me. They all respectfully left the campaign when they realized I wasn't capable of kicking Tick out. I tried recruiting more players to the game now that he was the only one, but as soon as they joined the game, everyone would see just how problematic of a person he was and would leave the next day. I was a feeble-minded DM for sure, and just took the players' excuses for leaving at face value. Many of them made up reasons like school or work. Looking back now, those were obvious lies. If you joined a pay-to-play game, you had to have known your schedule beforehand, but I was blissfully unaware of that and always assumed that their leaving was a problem out of my control, hence why I never bothered to kick Tick out of the game sooner. Eventually, I had enough. I wasn't nearly as horny as Tick, and I wasn't interested in role-playing his wet fantasies anymore. The last straw was when I was once again hosting a one-on-one session with the guy, as his character traveled to a forest town. There, in the span of 10 minutes, he tried to seduce the wife of a different man, ogled at the chests of everyone in town, and sighed at the lack of any brothels in the area. Finally, growing a backbone and realizing the roots of the problem, I kicked Tick out of the online server and disbanded the campaign. It was only him and me at that point, and I could live without the few bucks he'd pay me to play every month. Some might say that this could have all been avoided if I just kicked him out right at the start, but I always just assumed that adults outside of my family acted this way. Vulgar, rude, and horny 24/7. I know now that that's not always the case, but Tick took complete advantage of my social inexperience and ran my campaign through the dirt. Although I'd continue to run tabletop games online with a variety of success in the future, the fact that nobody was ever as painful to play with as Tick was a blessing. And now I'm much more aware of the common tropes of problem players as a result.
What exactly did you learn from this experience? If there's a takeaway or a big rule that has altered the way you run games, what would that be?
The big thing that I still praise myself to this day for being able to understand is I set a lot of expectations at the start of any tabletop RPG game I play. I create a list of things to go through before we start the game and make sure that everyone's fair with it. If something's up, I immediately point to it. I encourage people to try and refrain, and we move on. This horror story was the catalyst to all of my successful games in the future.
That is so important to notice. And yeah, I did notice when I played in your games, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, those have been the stories we have for today. We had Blaine Simple on. He does a lot of videos ranging from anime, D&D, anime into D&D videos. I would highly recommend you go check him out. Any closing words?
This was my first step in the war on crabs. I've learned your methods, and I'll be back to destroy you. Also, yeah, check out my stuff if I was slightly entertaining. Thanks a bunch.
No, wait, can we go back to that thing you were talking about earlier?